Good morning, scholars. Today we're going to continue our way through Book 1 of Herodotus, dealing with Chapter 6, that is, the introduction to Croesus, king of the Lydians, his origins, and his domains. Croesus and Ludos Mengenos, Pais de Aluateo, Tyrannus de Ethneon, ton entos aluos potamu, hos reon, apomesambries, metasdu surion tekai paphlagonon, ex ie, pros borein anemon, eston ux enon kaleomenon ponton. Hutos ho Croesus, barbaron protos ton hemes idmen, tus men katestrepsato Helenon, es poru apagogan, tus de bilus pros epoiesato. Katastrepsato men ionas, te kai ioleas, kai dorieas, tus in te asie. Pilus de prosepoiesato, lacedaemonius. Prode tes Croesu arches, pantes Helenes, esan eleuteroi. Togar chimerion strateuma, ta epitein ionien apicomenon, Croesu eon prosputeron, u catastrophe egeneto ton poleon, al ex epidromes harpage. Okay, so Croesus en Ludos Mengenos, Pais de Aluateo, Tyrannos de Ethneon, ton entos aluos potamu, hos reon apomesambries, metasdu surion tekai paphlagonon exie, prosborein anemon, es ton euxenon kaleomenon ponton. Okay, so quite a bit of vocabulary here. We have Ludos, which means Lydian. Genos, here meaning race or descent. It's worth reading the whole article for Genos in your Lindell and Scott. Here, the Genos is accusative of respect. Hales is a river, the name of a river. Reo is to flow. Mesambria is south. Metasdu is an adverb between. Syrioi are Syrians, but not the folks where the wretched civil war has gone on endlessly in our day, but referring to another peoples. Paphlagonoi are the Paphlagonians. Boree is north. Anemos, wind. Uxenos is Euxine, the name again of a sea, what we call the Black Sea. Kaleo is to call, and Pontos is sea. So, Croesus en Ludos Mengenos, Pais de Aluateo, Tyrannos de Ethneon ton entos aluos potamu, hos reon apomesambries, metasdu surion tekai paphlagonon exie, pros borein anemon, eston euxenon kaleomenon poton. So what he's described is the kingdom of Croesus And this wonderful map is taken from Robert B. Strassler's landmark Herodotus from 2007. I highly recommend it to anyone who wants to read Herodotus and follow his narrative according to our geological, I mean, geographic understandings. Of course, these were not Herodotus's own mental images, but the ones that we have because of our modern techniques. However that may be, you should see quite serious, easily, working from left to right or from west to east. You see the Greek peninsula, Delphi and Sparta marked, and you can imagine where Athens is. And then you have that island beneath it, which of course is Crete. But then you cross the Aegean Sea to what Herodotus knows as Asia, but which we know as modern Turkey. So there you have the kingdom of Croesus at the time when Herodotus is beginning his narrative of known events. And so the river Halys you see running between Paphlagonia and Cappadocia. So the Cappadocians are the people he refers to, I believe, as the Syrians. And then this, of course, the Halys runs up and empties into the Euxine Sea, the Black Sea, what we know as the Black Sea. So notice that Lydia is in the western portion of Asia, as Herodotus knows it. And you have the capital of Sardis, which was the capital of Croesus and would go on to become the western capital of the Persian Empire once the Persians had wiped Croesus out. Okay, so we will come back to this map in a bit. So Hutos, ho Croesus, barbaron, protos, ton hemes idmen, tus men katastrepsato helanon, es poru apagogan, tus de pilus prosepoiesato. Katastrepsato men ionas, te kai ioleas, kai dorieas, tus in te asie, pilus de prosepoiesato lacedaimonius. So, katastrepsato, katastrepomai, is to subjugate militarily or conquer. And we see katastrepsato, our first aorist, third singular. And then es poru apagogen begins with the preposition es followed by the accusative with a view to or for the purpose of, and then its direct modifier is the apagogan for the extraction or payment, and then payment of what? Poru. Poros is the technical term for tribute or taxes that a dominant power extracts from a subjugated power. So es poru hapagogan is for the purpose of extracting tribute. So, as Herodotus says, he is the first, protos ton hemes idmen. Sometimes Herodotus speaks of himself in the third person, the more dignified third person, and that's what we have here. So this protos ton hemes idmen is something that we'll see again. Pros oi elmai is to win over or to make friends. So tus de pilus prosepoiesato, again, a first aorist form. So, hutos hoi Ho hutos, ho Croesus, barbaron, protos, ton hemes idmen, tous men katastrepsato Helenon, esporu apagogen, tous de pilus prosepoiesato. Katastrepsato men ionas, te kai ioleas, kai dorieas, tous in te asie, pilus de prosepoiesato, Lacedaemonius. So again, referring to our map of Strassler, we see that you have Sparta in the west, and those are the Lacedaemonians, the Lacedaemonians. And then you see on the western shore of our Turkey, Herodotus's Asia, you see the Iolians, the Ionians, and the Dorians. These are Greek peoples who had settled on the western coast there during the colonization period that resulted from the population surge after the Dark Age had ended in Greece. So here we see the the origins of even the conflicts between the Greeks and the Turks in our own time. So these Iolians and Ionians and Dorians had been subjugated by Croesus, whereas he had actually made a treaty or some type of agreement with the Spartans, having inquired and learned that they were the most powerful, along with the Athenians, of the Greek peoples. So we'll see all that later in our narrative. But so this is the geography that we are dealing with here when we're speaking of Croesus. Okay. Now, prode tes Croesu arches, Pontes, Hellenes, Aeson, Eleuteroi, toga kemerion strateuma, ta epitein ioni en apikomenon, crossu eon presbyteron, ou katastrope egeneto, ton polion, al ex epidromes harpage. So we have arche, which here means rule. So prode tes Croesu arches. And Pontes Hellenes, Aeson, Eleuteroi. Eleuteros is free. And toga ki merion strateuma, so the invasion, strateuma, neuter, to epitein ionien apikomenon. And so notice the repetition of the neuter singular article, toga kimerion strateuma, to epitein ionien. And then remember what we said about attributive position and how that works. So, Croesu eon presbyteron. So it's very important that one see this Croesu for the genitive of comparison that it is. Croesu eon presbyteron, being earlier than Croesus. Ou katastrope egeneto ton polion, al ex epidromes harpage. So presbyteros is older, katastrope is subjugation, and whereas an epidrome is just an incursion, and harpage is plundering, from harpazdo, the verb we saw for the snatching of the women earlier. So he's making this distinction that these earlier attacks from the north of the Cimmerians really don't count because they were just like plundering raids, not full-on subjugation as was accomplished by Croesus. So here we go. Prodetes Croesu arches, pantes Hellenes, esan eleuteroi, toga chimeri on strateuma, to epitein ioni en apikomenon, Croesu eon presbyteron, ou katastrope egeneto, ton polion, al ex epidromes harpage. Okay, so let's now look at the particles, the way these are working. And we see, again, I've marked in green those particles that are responsive, that is, that respond or pick up the earlier men. And so we see, and then lastly, you see the green ala, which picks up the u. So, Croesus en lidos mangenos, pais de aluateo tyrannos de ethneon. So we have, on the one hand, with respect to race, but he was also the son of X, and he was also the leader or the ruler of, Y. So the men de is a way of presenting three different factors or descriptions of Croesus. And then we have the tekai, which unites closely the Syrion and Paphlagonon as objects of the metazdu, if we want to read that as a preposition, really. And then in the next sentence, sentence 2, we have that Croesus was protos ton hemes idmen, and then tus men, tus de. He wants to talk about, on the one hand, tus men, he subjugated Greeks for the purpose of exacting tribute, but on the other hand, he made friends with them. And then we have the men, and then de again, he subjugated the Ionians, the Aeolians, and the Dorians, whereas on the other hand, he made friends with the Lacedaemonians. So katastrepsato men, Ionas te kai Aeoleas kai Dorieas, tus in te asie. Pilus de prosepoiesato Lacedaemonius. And and then he just continues the narrative, prode, or you can even take this as contrasting, but before the rule of Croesus, prode tes Croesu arches, pantes Hellenes esan eleuteroi, toga chimeri on strateuma, to epitein ioni en apikomenon, Croesu eon prosputeron, ou katastrope egeneto ton polion, al ex epidromes harpage. So, as often we have, Saint Greek says something is not X but Y, much as English does, ou katastrope al harpage. So there we have it. Now, it's nice now to look at the bigger map, and you see that what we saw earlier was merely the far western reach of what will become, in Herodotus' narrative, the Great Persian Empire by the time we reach, well before Book 7, actually. But however that may be, we see that Sardis was the western capital, and if you look all the way almost to the middle of the map, Susa was the main capital, the central capital of the Persian Empire. So this revolt that he's even presaging here, the revolt of the Greek peoples against the Persian Empire, wherein the Athenians will actually help out, and that will be the beginning of the anger of the Persian king against the Athenians. After you have this rebellion where Sardis gets burned and the Athenians help out, and the Persian king has to ask, who are these Athenians? I've never even heard of them. And it's a quite wonderful scene later down the road. But so we have to realize that Herodotus is beginning his narratives that's with Croesus because he needs to talk about the beginnings of the interactions between the Greeks and the Asian races. And this will all lead to the climax of his narrative in books 7, 8, and 9, the invasion, the great invasion of Xerxes. Okay, so that's it. I'll see you soon as we continue our way through Herodotus. I think my next lecture will be a general presentation about how each book of Herodotus, what it covers, and the overall schema of the work. So until then, I look forward to seeing you. Continue to work hard on your Greek, and thank you especially to my Patreon subscribers. Bye-bye.